In the shadows of power, where billion-dollar secrets hide behind golden gates and ancient traditions, one man's sharp eyes caught what others missed. While the world slept peacefully, believing their most treasured institutions were safe, a deadly game of espionage was unfolding just steps away from where kings once walked, and queens still hold court. What started as a routine night shift for security guard Marcus Thompson would become the most important 12 hours of his career, and perhaps the most crucial moment in protecting centuries-old secrets that could shake the very foundations of a nation. Sometimes the difference between safety and catastrophe comes down to one person noticing something that doesn't belong, something that makes their stomach turn with the certainty that danger is near. This is the true story of how an ordinary man's extraordinary attention to detail prevented what intelligence experts later called the most sophisticated infiltration attempt in modern royal history, a story where split-second decisions meant the difference between protection and exposure, between security and scandal that could have changed everything. Marcus Thompson adjusted his collar against the cold March wind as he walked the perimeter of Kensington Palace at exactly 2:47 a.m. After 15 years working security for the Royal Protection Unit, he knew every shadow, every sound, and every person who belonged in this sacred space. The gravel crunched beneath his polished black boots as he made his way past the perfectly manicured gardens where tourists would gather in just a few hours to catch glimpses of royal life. Tonight felt different, though. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, like when you walk into your own house and immediately sense someone else has been there. The night air carried more than just the scent of early spring flowers. There was something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. His radio crackled softly with routine check-ins from other guards stationed around the property. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but Marcus had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Those same instincts had helped him catch 3 separate security threats over his career, including a disturbed individual who had somehow managed to scale the palace walls with nothing but determination and a homemade grappling hook. As he rounded the corner near the orangery, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. A small piece of fabric, no bigger than a matchbook, was caught on one of the ornate iron railings that surrounded the palace grounds. Most people would have walked right past it, assuming it was just trash blown by the wind. But Marcus wasn't most people. He pulled out his flashlight and examined the fabric more closely. It was black, made of some kind of technical material that felt expensive between his fingers. More importantly, it was fresh. The edges weren't weathered or faded, like something that had been stuck there for days or weeks. Someone wearing this fabric had been here recently, probably within the last few hours. Marcus immediately radioed his supervisor, Detective Inspector Sarah Chen, who had been overseeing palace security for the past 3 years. Sarah was known throughout the force for her sharp mind and complete dedication to protecting the royal family. She had trained under some of the best security experts in the world and had a reputation for taking every potential threat seriously, no matter how small. "Sarah, this is Marcus. I'm going to need you to come take a look at something near the orangery. Found some evidence that suggests we might have had an unauthorized visitor." "On my way," came Sarah's immediate response. "Don't touch anything else and keep that area secure." While waiting for Sarah to arrive, Marcus began scanning the surrounding area more carefully. His trained eyes looked for anything out of place. Disturbed soil, broken branches, footprints, anything that might tell him more about who had been here and what they were doing. The palace grounds were enormous, covering over 26 acres, but Marcus knew every inch of his assigned section. That's when he spotted the second clue. Near the base of an old oak tree, partially hidden by fallen leaves, was what appeared to be a small electronic device. It was about the size of a smartphone but much thinner, with a matte black finish that seemed designed to avoid reflecting light. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he realized what he might be looking at. Sarah arrived within minutes, moving quickly across the grounds with the purposeful stride of someone who had dealt with security threats before. She was a small woman in her late 30s, but her presence commanded immediate respect. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes were already scanning the area as she approached Marcus. "Show me what you found," she said without preamble. Marcus pointed out the fabric first, then led her to where he had discovered the electronic device. Sarah pulled on latex gloves and carefully picked up the device, turning it over in her hands while studying its construction. "This is definitely not standard issue for any of our teams," she said quietly. "The construction looks military grade, possibly foreign manufacture. We need to treat this as a potential intelligence gathering device." "Intelligence gathering?" Marcus asked. though he was beginning to understand the serious implications of what they had discovered. Someone was trying to plant surveillance equipment on palace grounds, Sarah explained. This device could be designed to intercept communications, gather information about security protocols, or even monitor the daily routines of family members. If it had been successfully installed and activated, it could have provided whoever placed it with access to incredibly sensitive information. Sarah immediately contacted the counterintelligence team at Scotland Yard, who dispatched a specialized unit to the palace within the hour. The team included technical experts who could analyze the device and determine its capabilities, as well as investigators who could try to trace its origin. While they waited for the specialist to arrive, Marcus and Sarah began a more thorough search of the immediate area. They found additional evidence that someone had spent considerable time near the orangery, including disturbed earth that suggested someone had been digging or attempting to bury something. Detective Chief Inspector James Morrison arrived with the technical team just as the sun was beginning to rise over the London skyline. Morrison was a legend in British law enforcement, with over 20 years of experience dealing with threats against the royal family and the British government. He had the kind of steady, reassuring presence that made everyone around him feel more confident about handling whatever crisis they were facing. "Talk to me," Morrison said as he approached Marcus and Sarah. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Sarah briefed him on everything they had discovered, showing him the fabric, the electronic device, and the other evidence they had found. Morrison listened carefully, asking detailed questions about the timeline and the exact location where each piece of evidence had been discovered. "Based on what you've shown me, this looks like a professional operation," Morrison said after examining everything. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing and had access to sophisticated equipment. This wasn't some random person trying to get close to the palace out of curiosity." The technical team began their analysis of the electronic device while Morrison, Sarah, and Marcus discussed the security implications of what had been discovered. If someone had successfully planted surveillance equipment on the palace grounds, they could have gained access to information that would be invaluable to foreign intelligence services or criminal organizations. "The timing is particularly concerning," Morrison explained. "We're less than 2 weeks away from the state visit by the German Chancellor, and there are several other high-profile events scheduled for the coming month. If someone was gathering intelligence in preparation for some kind of attack or infiltration, we need to know about it immediately." Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the team's chief technical analyst, approached the group with preliminary findings about the device. Dr. Hartwell was a brilliant woman in her mid-40s who had spent the previous decade developing counter-surveillance techniques for MI5. Her expertise in foreign surveillance technology was considered among the best in Europe. "This device is definitely foreign manufacture," she reported. "The components are high quality, probably military or intelligence grade. It's designed to be virtually undetectable once installed, and it has the capability to intercept multiple types of communications simultaneously." "What kind of communications?" Sarah asked. "Radio frequencies used by security teams, mobile phone signals, even some types of encrypted communications if it had been properly configured. Essentially, whoever placed this device here would have been able to monitor almost everything happening in this area of the palace grounds." The implications were staggering. If the device had been successfully installed and activated, foreign agents could have gained access to security protocols, staff schedules, visitor information, and potentially even private communications involving members of the royal family. "Do we have any idea how long someone would have needed to install something like this?" Morrison asked. "Based on the sophistication of the device and the evidence we've found, probably at least 30 to 40 minutes, Dr. Hartwell replied. "They would have needed time to properly position and calibrate the equipment to ensure it would function correctly." 30 to 40 minutes, Marcus repeated, shaking his head. "That means whoever did this spent significant time on the palace grounds without being detected by our routine patrols. Which tells us they had detailed knowledge of our security procedures," Sarah added. "They knew exactly when and where they could operate without being spotted." Morrison's expression grew more serious as he considered the implications. "We're looking at a sophisticated intelligence operation, possibly state-sponsored. This isn't the kind of equipment or expertise you can buy on the black market." The investigation team spent the next several hours conducting a comprehensive search of the entire palace grounds, looking for any additional devices or evidence. They found 2 more locations where someone had been digging, though no additional electronic equipment was discovered. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his regular duties while also serving as a key witness in the investigation. He walked investigators through every detail of his discovery, explaining exactly what had caught his attention and why he had decided to investigate further. "Your attention to detail probably prevented what could have been a massive security breach," Morrison told Marcus as the initial investigation wrapped up. "Most people would have walked right past that piece of fabric without giving it a second thought."
It's my job to notice things that don't belong. Marcus replied simply.
After 15 years doing this work, you develop an instinct for when something's not right. But even as the immediate threat appeared to have been neutralized, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whoever had attempted to plant surveillance equipment at the palace wasn't likely to give up after one failed attempt. They had invested significant time, money, and effort into this operation, which suggested they would probably try again. Sarah seemed to be thinking along the same lines. We need to assume this was just their first attempt, she told Morrison. Whoever did this is probably already planning their next move. Agreed, Morrison replied. We're going to need to implement additional security measures and review all of our current protocols. If they know enough about our procedures to avoid detection for 30 to 40 minutes, we need to assume they know more than we're comfortable with. Deserting to watch out again, writers and activers, juries are found just as effective rejection. Writers are found in self at the center of what was rapidly becoming one of the most significant security investigations in recent palace history. Representatives from MI5, Scotland Yard's Counter-Terrorism Command, and the Royal Protection Unit were all working together to understand who had attempted this breach and what their ultimate objectives might have been. The fabric sample was sent to a specialized laboratory for analysis, where experts would attempt to trace its origin and determine what kind of clothing or equipment it had come from. The electronic device was taken to a secure facility where it could be safely analyzed without risk of accidentally activating any hidden functions. Marcus knew that his discovery had set in motion a chain of events that would probably continue for weeks or even months as investigators worked to uncover the full scope of the threat. But for now, he felt satisfied that his vigilance had prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. As he prepared to end his shift that morning, Marcus took one final walk around the area where he had made his discovery. The palace grounds looked exactly as they had the night before, peaceful and secure under the brightening morning sky. Tourists were already beginning to gather near the main gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of royal activity. None of them would ever know how close they had come to witnessing the aftermath of a successful intelligence operation against one of Britain's most important institutions. And that, Marcus reflected, was exactly how it should be. 3 days after Marcus Thompson's discovery, the investigation had expanded far beyond what anyone initially expected. Scotland Yard's Anti-Terrorism Command had taken over primary responsibility for the case, working closely with MI5 and international intelligence agencies to understand who was behind the attempted surveillance operation. Detective Chief Inspector James Morrison found himself coordinating with intelligence analysts from across Europe as they tried to piece together the origins of the sophisticated electronic device. The laboratory analysis had revealed disturbing information about the capabilities of the equipment and the level of expertise required to manufacture it. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell called Morrison into her laboratory early Tuesday morning with updates that would change the entire scope of the investigation. Her technical team had spent the previous 72 hours carefully dismantling and analyzing the device without triggering any potential self-destruct mechanisms. James, what we've discovered is far more concerning than we initially thought. Hartwell began, gesturing toward the dismantled device spread across her examination table. This isn't just a surveillance device. It's a sophisticated multifunction intelligence gathering platform that could have provided whoever planted it with unprecedented access to palace operations. Morrison studied the tiny components that had been carefully arranged and labeled on the table. Even dismantled, the device looked like something from a science fiction movie rather than real-world espionage equipment. Walk me through what it could actually do, Morrison requested. First, it has the capability to intercept and record all radio communications within approximately a half-mile radius, Dr. Hartwell explained. That includes security team communications, emergency services, and even some encrypted military frequencies. Second, it contains a cellular interceptor that could monitor and record mobile phone conversations, text messages, and data transmissions. Anyone using their phone anywhere near the palace would have been unknowingly sharing their communications with whoever was monitoring this device. Third, and perhaps most concerning, it has the ability to hack into nearby Wi-Fi networks and potentially access computer systems connected to those networks. Given the proximity to palace administrative offices, this could have provided access to scheduling information, security protocols, and other highly sensitive data. Morrison felt his stomach sink as he realized the full implications of what Dr. Hartwell was describing. So, if this had been successfully installed and activated, foreign agents could have essentially monitored everything happening at the palace? Not just monitored, Dr. Hartwell corrected. They could have actively gathered intelligence about security procedures, visitor schedules, staff routines, and potentially even private communications involving members of the royal family. This device represents one of the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering capabilities I've ever encountered. The technical analysis also revealed clues about the device's origin. The components were manufactured by companies in at least 4 different countries, suggesting a deliberate effort to obscure the device's true source. However, the assembly techniques and programming showed characteristics consistent with intelligence agencies from certain Eastern European countries. Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Sarah Chen was coordinating with international law enforcement agencies to investigate how someone could have gained the detailed knowledge of palace security procedures necessary to attempt such an operation. The fabric sample had been traced to a specialized manufacturer of tactical clothing used by military and intelligence personnel.
"We're dealing with professionals," Sarah reported to Morrison during their daily briefing.
The fabric comes from a company that only sells to government agencies and certified security contractors. Whoever acquired this material had legitimate credentials or very sophisticated connections.
Any luck tracking recent purchases?
The manufacturer is being cooperative, but their client list includes intelligence agencies from dozens of countries. We're going through sales records from the past 6 months, but it's going to take time to identify any suspicious transactions.
The investigation was further complicated by the discovery that someone had been conducting surveillance of palace security procedures for much longer than initially suspected. Security camera footage from the weeks leading up to Marcus's discovery showed several individuals who appeared to be conducting reconnaissance of the palace grounds. Agent Michael Stevens from MI5's Counterintelligence Division had joined the investigation to help analyze the surveillance footage and identify potential foreign operatives. Stevens was known throughout the intelligence community for his ability to spot trained operatives who were trying to blend in with normal tourist crowds. "We've identified at least 3 individuals who appear multiple times in security footage over the past month," Stevens reported. "Their behavior patterns are consistent with professional surveillance training. They're not just casual tourists who happen to visit the palace multiple times." "What kind of behavior patterns?" "They're systematically photographing security cameras, timing guard patrols, and mapping sightlines from various positions around the palace perimeter. They're also using counter-surveillance techniques to avoid being followed or identified by our standard security measures." Stevens showed Morrison enlarged photographs from the security footage that highlighted the suspicious behavior he had identified. The individuals appeared to be working independently, but their activities were coordinated in a way that suggested they were part of the same operation. "Based on their techniques and the sophistication of their equipment, we believe we're dealing with a state-sponsored intelligence operation," Stevens concluded. "This isn't organized crime or terrorism. This is espionage at the highest level." The implications were staggering for British national security. If foreign intelligence agencies had successfully penetrated palace security, they could have gained access to information that would compromise not just the royal family's safety, but also sensitive government communications and diplomatic activities. Prime Minister security briefings were sometimes conducted at palace locations, and several foreign dignitaries maintained regular communications with palace staff regarding official visits and protocol arrangements. A successful intelligence operation could have provided enemy nations with advanced knowledge of diplomatic strategies and security arrangements for visiting heads of state. Morrison convened an emergency meeting with representatives from all the agencies involved in the investigation. The group included Sarah Chen from the Royal Protection Unit, Agent Stevens from MI5, Dr. Hartwell from the Technical Analysis Team, and senior officials from Scotland Yard's Counter-Terrorism Command. "Based on everything we've learned so far, we need to assume this was just the first phase of a much larger operation," Morrison began. "The level of sophistication and advanced planning suggests they're not going to simply abandon their objectives because one device was discovered. What are you thinking in terms of next steps?" Sarah asked. "We need to completely review and update all security protocols," Morrison replied. "We also need to assume that our current procedures have been compromised and develop new approaches that the operatives wouldn't be familiar with." Agent Stevens added his perspective from the intelligence community. "We also need to consider the possibility that they have additional assets already in place. The individuals we've identified in surveillance footage could be just the visible part of a much larger network." Dr. Hartwell raised another concerning possibility. "If they were able to plant one device, they may have successfully installed others that we haven't discovered yet. We need to conduct a comprehensive electronic sweep of the entire palace complex and surrounding areas." The electronic sweep began that afternoon using specialized equipment capable of detecting even the most sophisticated surveillance devices. Teams of technicians methodically searched every building, every garden, and every public area around the palace grounds. Marcus Thompson found himself working closely with the technical teams as they conducted their searches. His intimate knowledge of the palace grounds and his ability to spot things that were out of place made him invaluable to the investigation. "Marcus, I want you to think about anything else you've noticed over the past few weeks that seemed unusual," Morrison asked during one of their conversations. "Maybe something that didn't seem important at the time, but looking back might have been related to this operation." Marcus spent considerable time thinking through his recent shifts, trying to remember any details that might be relevant to the investigation. After 15 years of security work, he had trained himself to notice and remember even minor anomalies.
"There was something about 3 weeks ago," Marcus finally said.
"I was doing a routine patrol around midnight when I noticed someone near the main gates who seemed to be having trouble with their camera. They were fumbling with it for several minutes, apparently trying to get it to work properly."
"Did you approach them?" "I kept watching from a distance. Eventually they seemed to get their camera working, and took several photographs of the palace facade."
At the time I assumed they were just a tourist who was excited about getting some night shots, but thinking back, their behavior was unusual. Unusual how? Most tourists who take pictures at night use the flash or have their friends pose with them. This person was working alone and seemed more focused on the technical aspects of photography than on getting memorial photos. Morrison made detailed notes about Marcus's recollection. Even seemingly minor observations could provide important clues about how the surveillance operation had been conducted. The electronic sweep of the palace grounds took 3 full days and ultimately discovered 2 additional surveillance devices that had been successfully installed and activated. Both devices were found in locations that would have been extremely difficult to access without detailed knowledge of security patrol routes and timing. "These devices have been operational for at least 2 weeks, Dr. Hartwell reported after analyzing the newly discovered equipment. "They've been continuously transmitting data to an external receiver, which means someone has been actively monitoring palace communications and activities for an extended period." The discovery of active surveillance devices transformed the investigation from a prevented security breach into an ongoing counterintelligence operation. The devices were carefully examined to determine what information they had transmitted and to whom. "We're dealing with a successful intelligence operation that we only partially detected," Agent Stevens explained to the assembled investigators. They achieved at least part of their objectives before Marcus discovered their equipment. Morrison realized that the investigation would need to expand to determine what sensitive information might have been compromised and how it could be used against British interests. The royal family would need to be briefed on the security breach, and diplomatic communications with foreign governments might need to be adjusted based on what intelligence had potentially been gathered. "We also need to consider the possibility that this operation is ongoing," Stevens added. "If they've successfully extracted intelligence for 2 weeks, they may have additional phases planned that we haven't identified yet. If they know our security procedures well enough to avoid detection for weeks, they probably know that we've discovered their equipment. They may be planning to escalate their activities before we can implement new security measures." The investigation team realized they were not just dealing with a completed intelligence operation, but potentially an ongoing threat that could evolve and adapt as circumstances changed. The sophisticated equipment and professional techniques suggested that whoever was behind the operation had significant resources and expertise. Morrison decided to implement immediate changes to palace security protocols while the investigation continued. Guard patrol routes were modified, communication frequencies were changed, and additional surveillance equipment was installed to monitor for future infiltration attempts. Marcus found himself at the center of the enhanced security measures, working with new team members and following updated procedures designed to prevent future intelligence-gathering operations. His role had evolved from routine security guard to key participant in an active counterintelligence operation. The implications of the discovered surveillance operation extended far beyond the palace itself. Intelligence agencies across Europe were working together to identify similar operations that might be targeting other government facilities and diplomatic installations. As the second phase of the investigation concluded, Morrison and his team realized they were dealing with one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever attempted against British sovereign institutions. The prevention of the full operation had required exceptional vigilance from Marcus Thompson, but the investigation was revealing that much more work would be needed to completely neutralize the threat.
2 weeks after the discovery of active surveillance devices at Kensington Palace, Detective Chief Inspector James Morrison received intelligence that would bring the investigation to its dramatic conclusion.
MI6 had intercepted communications suggesting that the foreign operatives were planning a final, much more ambitious phase of their intelligence-gathering operation. Agent Michael Stevens from MI5 briefed Morrison on the intercepted communications during an emergency meeting at Scotland Yard headquarters. The information had come from a highly classified source within the international intelligence community, and it painted a picture of an operation far more extensive than anyone had initially imagined. The communications we've intercepted suggest they're planning to infiltrate the state dinner for the German Chancellor next week, Stevens reported. This wouldn't be a simple surveillance operation. They're talking about direct human intelligence gathering at the highest levels of government. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he realized the full implications of what Stevens was describing. The state dinner would include not just members of the royal family, but also the Prime Minister, senior cabinet ministers, intelligence officials, and diplomats from multiple countries. What kind of human intelligence gathering are we talking about? Morrison asked. Based on the intercepted communications, they appear to have recruited someone who will have legitimate access to the event, Stevens explained. We're looking at the possibility of a mole within either the palace staff, the catering service, or one of the security contractors. Elizabeth Hartwell had been analyzing the technical capabilities of the discovered surveillance devices and had reached disturbing conclusions about how the information they had gathered could be used to support a human intelligence operation. The devices they planted provided them with detailed information about security protocols, staff schedules, and communication procedures, Dr. Hartwell reported. That information would be invaluable for preparing an operative to infiltrate the palace during a high-security event. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen had been working with the Royal Protection Unit to identify everyone who would have access to the palace during the state dinner. The list included hundreds of people from senior government officials to kitchen staff, security personnel, and diplomatic protocol officers. We're dealing with over 300 individuals who will have legitimate access to various parts of the palace during the dinner, Sarah reported. Each one of them will need to be thoroughly vetted, and we need to do it without alerting anyone that we suspect there might be a mole. Morrison realized they were facing an unprecedented security challenge. They needed to identify and neutralize a foreign intelligence operative who had successfully penetrated the highest levels of British government operations, all while maintaining the appearance of normal security procedures for one of the most important diplomatic events of the year. We're going to need to set up a counterintelligence operation within the security preparations for the state dinner, Morrison decided. We'll use the dinner itself as an opportunity to identify and capture the operative. Agent Stevens outlined the approach they would take. We'll create multiple layers of false information and see which version gets transmitted back to the Foreign Intelligence Service. By tracking which misinformation appears in their communications, we can identify who's providing them with inside information. Marcus Thompson found himself playing a crucial role in the counterintelligence operation. His knowledge of palace security procedures and his proven ability to spot anomalies made him perfect for monitoring the behavior of everyone involved in preparations for the state dinner. Marcus, I need you to watch for anyone whose behavior seems inconsistent with their supposed role, Morrison explained. Someone who asks questions they shouldn't need to ask. Someone who seems overly interested in security details that aren't relevant to their job. Anyone who doesn't quite fit the pattern of how palace staff normally behave. The preparation for the counterintelligence operation required coordination between multiple government agencies. MI5 provided expertise in identifying foreign operatives. Scotland Yard's Counter-Terrorism Command managed the security aspects. And the Royal Protection Unit maintained normal protocol procedures to avoid alerting the suspected mole. Dr. Keebs supplanted with the suspected mole. Hartwell's team installed additional surveillance equipment throughout the palace, designed to monitor not just external threats but also the behavior of everyone with legitimate access to the building. The new equipment could track movement patterns, monitor communications, and detect unusual behavior that might indicate espionage activities. We're essentially turning the palace into a controlled environment where we can observe every interaction and identify anyone who's gathering information they shouldn't have, Dr. Hartwell explained to the investigation team. The week leading up to the state dinner became an intensive intelligence operation disguised as normal diplomatic preparations. Every member of the palace staff was unknowingly being monitored as they went about their regular duties preparing for the high-profile event. Sarah Chen coordinated with diplomatic security to ensure that the counterintelligence operation wouldn't interfere with legitimate preparations for the German Chancellor's visit. The diplomatic implications of the dinner were significant enough that any security problems could damage British-German relations for years. We need to catch the operative without disrupting the dinner, Sarah emphasized during daily briefings. The diplomatic success of this event is almost as important as the security aspects of it. 3 days before the dinner, Marcus noticed something that immediately caught his attention. One of the catering supervisors, a woman named Elena Volkov who had been working palace events for over 2 years, was asking detailed questions about security camera locations that seemed unnecessary for her catering responsibilities. She wanted to know about camera coverage in the service corridors and staff preparation areas, Marcus reported to Morrison. When I asked why she needed that information, she said something about ensuring the catering staff wouldn't interfere with security protocols, but the questions seemed more specific than necessary. Morrison immediately authorized enhanced surveillance of Elena Volkov while the investigation team researched her background more thoroughly. Her employment records showed that she had been hired through a reputable catering agency and had successfully completed background checks, but something about her recent behavior was raising red flags. Agent Stevens ran Elena Volkov's information through intelligence databases and discovered connections that immediately elevated her to the primary suspect in their investigation. She had family members in Eastern European countries that were known to be actively engaged in intelligence operations against Western nations. Her sister works for a telecommunications company that's believed to be a front for intelligence gathering activities, Stevens reported. Elena herself has traveled to that country 3 times in the past year, always for short trips that she claimed were family visits. Dr. Hartwell's surveillance equipment detected that Elena had been using her mobile phone to send encrypted messages during her shifts at the palace. The timing of her communications corresponded with her access to different areas of the building, suggesting she was reporting on security procedures and staff activities. She's definitely gathering and transmitting intelligence, Dr. Hartwell confirmed. The encryption she's using is sophisticated, but we've been able to determine that she's sending regular reports about palace operations to an external contact. Morrison made the decision to allow Elena to continue her activities while under close surveillance, hoping to gather more information about the full scope of the intelligence operation before making any arrests. The counterintelligence team wanted to identify her contacts and understand the complete network of operatives. The day before the state dinner, Elena's behavior became even more suspicious. She requested access to areas of the palace that weren't necessary for catering preparations, and she spent considerable time photographing room layouts under the pretense of planning serving arrangements. Marcus coordinated with the surveillance team to ensure that Elena's activities were being comprehensively documented. Every conversation, every photograph, and every area she accessed was being recorded as evidence for what would eventually become a major espionage prosecution. She's clearly preparing for something more than just serving dinner, Marcus observed to Morrison. Her behavior suggests she's planning to use tomorrow's event for some kind of intelligence gathering that goes beyond just observing the proceedings. The evening before the state dinner, Dr. Hardwell's technical team detected Elena attempting to install a small recording device in one of the private dining rooms where confidential conversations between government officials were expected to take place. We caught her in the act, Dr. Hardwell reported to Morrison. She was installing a sophisticated listening device that would have been capable of recording private conversations between the Prime Minister, the German Chancellor, and other senior officials. Morrison realized that they had identified not just the mole, but also prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach. Private conversations during the state dinner were likely to include sensitive information about trade negotiations, defense cooperation, and other matters of national security importance. We move tonight, Morrison decided. We can't risk letting her complete whatever she's planning for tomorrow's dinner. The arrest of Elena Volkov was coordinated to happen simultaneously with raids on several other locations where intelligence suggested her associates might be operating. MI5 and Scotland Yard worked together to ensure that the entire network of operatives was neutralized before they could destroy evidence or flee the country. Elena was arrested as she left the palace after her final preparation shift. The evidence against her included the surveillance recordings of her installing listening devices, encrypted communications with foreign contacts, and detailed intelligence reports about palace security procedures that she had transmitted to her handlers. Agent Stevens led the interrogation of Elena Volkov, using techniques designed to extract information about the full scope of the intelligence operation while respecting her legal rights. The interrogation revealed the extent of the Foreign Intelligence Service's interest in British government operations. She was part of a long-term operation aimed at gathering intelligence about British diplomatic activities, defense planning, and the personal security arrangements for government officials, Stevens reported to Morrison after the initial interrogation. The operation had been in planning for over a year, with Elena's recruitment and placement at the palace being just one component of a much larger intelligence gathering effort targeting multiple aspects of the British government. Hartwell's analysis of Elena's communications equipment revealed that she had been transmitting intelligence about palace operations for over 6 months. The Foreign Intelligence Service had been building a comprehensive picture of British security procedures, diplomatic protocols, and government decision-making processes. They know far more about our operations than we're comfortable with, Dr. Hartwell warned. Even though we've neutralized this particular operation, the information they've already gathered could be used for future intelligence operations or even potential security threats.
The state dinner proceeded as planned the following evening, with enhanced security measures that were invisible to the diplomatic participants.
The German chancellor's visit was considered a complete success, with no indication that the evening's diplomatic activities had been threatened by espionage concerns. Marcus Thompson returned to his regular duties as a security guard, but with a new understanding of his crucial role in protecting national security. His initial discovery of the fabric caught on the palace railing had ultimately led to the disruption of a sophisticated foreign intelligence operation. Morrison presented Marcus with a commendation for exceptional service during a private ceremony attended by senior officials from Scotland Yard, MI5, and the Royal Protection Unit. The ceremony recognized not just his vigilance in discovering the initial evidence, but also his contributions to the subsequent counterintelligence operation. Your attention to detail and willingness to investigate something that seemed minor prevented what could have been one of the most successful foreign intelligence operations ever conducted against British government institutions, Morrison told Marcus during the ceremony.
The investigation's conclusion revealed that the foreign intelligence operation had been far more sophisticated and extensive than anyone initially realized. Elena Volkov and her associates had been working for over a year to gather comprehensive intelligence about British government operations, with the ultimate goal of providing their country with strategic advantages in diplomatic and trade negotiations.
The electronic surveillance devices that Marcus had discovered were just one component of a multi-layered intelligence gathering operation that included human assets, technical surveillance, and cyber espionage capabilities. The prevention of the operation required collaboration between multiple intelligence agencies and law enforcement organizations. Agent Stevens summarized the significance of the successful counterintelligence operation during the final briefing for all participants. This case demonstrates both the sophistication of modern espionage threats and the importance of basic security awareness in preventing those threats from succeeding. A foreign intelligence service invested significant resources and over a year of planning into this operation. They successfully penetrated palace security and gathered sensitive intelligence for months before being detected. The fact that we were able to identify and neutralize the threat was due to the exceptional vigilance of people like Marcus Thompson and the coordinated response of our intelligence and law enforcement communities.
Dr.
Hartwell added her perspective on the technical aspects of the operation. The surveillance equipment we discovered represents some of the most advanced intelligence gathering technology we've encountered. The fact that it was deployed so close to such sensitive government facilities should serve as a warning about the evolving nature of espionage threats. Sarah Chen reflected on the implications for royal security procedures. This investigation has led to comprehensive reviews and updates of all our security protocols. We've learned that even the most sophisticated security arrangements can be vulnerable to well-planned, long-term intelligence operations. The case of Elena Volkov and the foreign intelligence operation against Kensington Palace became a classified study case for intelligence and law enforcement agencies across Europe. The techniques used by the foreign operatives and the methods used to detect and neutralize them provided valuable lessons for protecting other sensitive government facilities. Marcus Thompson continued his work as a security guard at Kensington Palace, but with an enhanced understanding of his role in protecting not just the royal family but British national security interests. His sharp eyes and attention to detail had proven that sometimes the most sophisticated intelligence operations can be defeated by the vigilance of ordinary people who take their responsibilities seriously. The successful conclusion of the counterintelligence operation demonstrated that protecting national security requires cooperation between intelligence agencies, law enforcement, and frontline security personnel who maintain constant vigilance against threats that may not always be immediately obvious. Marcus's discovery of a small piece of fabric on a palace railing had ultimately prevented what intelligence experts described as potentially one of the most damaging espionage operations in modern British history.